The skies of Veora were perpetually painted in shades of twilight, a deep, brooding blue that bled into silvery gray. The very air hummed with a latent energy, a thrum of power that vibrated through the cobblestone streets and ancient forests, a testament to the kingdom's might and the wolves and humans who coexisted under its banner. All of it was held in check by one man, the axis upon which their world turned, the Alpha King, Kalin. For Lyra, a creature of the quiet, remote outskirts, the capital city was an assault on the senses. The grandeur was suffocating. She stood at the periphery of the grand hall, a half-wolf orphan trying to make herself smaller, less visible. Her mixed heritage was a brand of otherness she carried everywhere, but here, among the pure-blooded elite, it felt like a screaming beacon. She was here for Lyra. Her childhood friend, her only family, had been chosen as a potential mate for a high-ranking pack member. The invitation had been extended out of politeness and lingering affection, but Lyra had seen the flicker of apprehension in Lyra's eyes. Her presence was a risk. The hall was a symphony of shimmering gold and brilliant silver. Laughter, sharp and confident, echoed off the high ceilings, a language of belonging she didn't speak. The scent of lavender and pine, usually calming, was here thick with the pungent aroma of wolf, of power, pride, and pure bloodlines. Lyra's own wolf, the part of her she kept locked away in a deep, secret part of her soul, stirred uneasily. She found a seat near the back, a shadow trying to blend into the stone walls. She focused on her hands, pale and trembling in her lap, wishing for the ceremony to be over. The last thing she wanted was attention. The very last thing was the gaze of the king. But fate, it seemed, was not merely indifferent, it was cruel. A heavy, resonant creak silenced the hall as the great doors swung open. The air shifted, growing dense, charged with an authority that demanded submission. And then he entered. King Kalin. He moved with the lethal grace of a predator, his presence an invisible force that commanded the room. His dark hair fell in untamed waves around a face of sharp, unforgiving angles. But it was his eyes, burning with the molten gold of his wolf, that held the room captive. They scanned the crowd, and with every step, the legends whispered about him came to life. The young king who had slain armies, forged peace from chaos, and bore the weight of a crown after the tragic death of his parents. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She quickly averted her gaze, focusing on a crack in the floor, pleading with any god that would listen to let her remain invisible. But his steps slowed, then stopped. A chill, cold and sharp, traced the length of her spine. She could feel the weight of a stare, heavy and intent. Against her will, her eyes lifted. His golden gaze was locked directly on her. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. The noise of the hall faded into a dull roar in her ears. She was frozen, her breath caught in her throat. In the depths of his eyes, she saw not just power, but a flicker of something else, something that terrified her more than his authority, a dawning, perplexed recognition. He turned fully to face her. The silence in the room became absolute, a physical pressure against her skin. She could feel hundreds of eyes turning towards her, their judgment a palpable heat. You. His voice was like distant thunder, a low rumble that vibrated in her very bones. Lyra flinched. You aren't like the others. The words were not an accusation, but they felt like one. They settled on her shoulders with the weight of a mountain. She stumbled to her feet, her legs threatening to buckle. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, she stammered, her throat parchment dry. I didn't mean to intrude. Kalin's expression was an unreadable mask, though the intensity of his stare softened by a fraction. You're not intruding, but something is different about you. He inhaled deeply, his brow furrowing. Your scent. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. The scent. Her mother's dying warning echoed in her mind. Hide it, Lyra. Always. Never let them know what you are. Her half-wolf nature was a secret more carefully guarded than any treasure. It was the scent of the wilds, of humanity, of something impure and dangerous in their pristine world. Your scent is. Kalin inhaled again, a predator trying to decipher unfamiliar prey. It's familiar. Her stomach twisted into knots. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken truths and peril. He could smell it. He could smell the taint in her blood. I'm not who you think I am, Your Majesty, she said, the words tumbling out in a rushed, desperate plea. I'm just a guest. I have no place here. He studied her for a long, agonizing moment, his golden eyes seeing too much. You're no ordinary guest, he stated, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre that was for her ears alone. Lyra took an involuntary step back, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She had never been the center of anything, let alone the focus of a king. She needed to escape, to run before he unraveled the very fabric of her existence. I should go, she whispered, her voice shaking. I'm sorry for disturbing you. She turned to flee, but his voice, softer now, yet no less commanding, stopped her in her tracks. Stay, please. The word, please, was a shock. It wasn't an order from a king, but a request from a man. A plea that held a confusion mirroring her own. The air between them crackled with an unspoken tension, a pull she didn't understand but could feel in the marrow of her bones. Her instincts screamed danger, but her wolf, that hidden, wild part of her, stirred with a strange, compelling curiosity. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, they simply stared at one another, two strangers bound by an invisible thread in a silent hall of witnesses. Finally, Kalin broke the silence, his voice a low murmur. You are more than you let on, aren't you? Lyra's mouth was too dry to form a word. His presence was a storm, overwhelming and powerful, yet she could feel his genuine curiosity, a fascination that went beyond her strange scent. As she met his gaze again, she saw a flicker of something deep, something that seemed to see past her walls, past her fear, and into the hidden soul she had kept locked away for so long. Let's talk later, he said, the command returning to his tone, though it was tempered. There's much we need to discuss. He didn't wait for her agreement. He simply turned, his dark cloak swirling around him, and walked away. The spell was broken, and the noise of the hall rushed back in. But the weight of his gaze lingered on her like a phantom touch. As she stood there, trembling and alone in the crowd, Lyra knew with a terrifying certainty that her life, her carefully constructed world of shadows and silence, had just been irrevocably shattered. The ceremony continued around her, but she was no longer a part of it. She was caught in the orbit of the Alpha King, and she had no idea if she would survive the collision. The air in the kingdom of Veora tasted of ancient stone and cold power. To Lyra, a creature of the sun-dappled forests and humble, earthy scents of the outskirts, it was a flavor that clung to the back of her throat, a constant reminder of her intrusion. The capital city, Athol, was a sprawling masterpiece of intimidating architecture, its spires clawing at a sky perpetually draped in shades of twilight blue and brooding gray. It was a place of sharp edges and sharper hierarchies, a world away from the soft, forgiving wilderness she called home. She stood at the threshold of the grand hall, a statue of trepidation carved from fear and obligation. Her heart hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm against her ribs, a wild drumbeat protesting its gilded cage. The invitation, a heavy piece of parchment sealed with royal wax, felt like a brand in the hidden pocket of her simple woolen dress. It had been extended by Alara, her childhood friend, the only tether Lyra had to a concept of family. Alara, beautiful, pure-blooded Alara, had been chosen as a potential mate for a high-ranking member of the Silvermane pack. Her invitation to Lyra had been a gesture of love, but it was a love laced with a painful understanding of the risk it carried. Lyra's very existence was a carefully guarded secret, a truth she carried like a shard of ice in her soul. She was a half-breed, a child of two worlds who belonged to neither. Her father, a human traveler with kind eyes and a fleeting presence, had vanished before her first tooth had cut through. Her mother, a gentle she-wolf from a minor border pack, had died when Lyra was 10, her final breath a warning that had shaped every moment of Lyra's life since. Hide it, my love. Your scent, your blood, it is different. The pure bloods will never understand. They will see you as a threat, an abomination. Stay in the shadows, where you are safe. And so, she had. For years, she had lived on the fringes, tending a small herb garden, speaking only to the few traders and farmers who knew her as the quiet, orphaned girl with strangely keen senses. She had learned to suppress the wolf within, to quiet its instincts, to walk with a human's gait and speak with a human's cadence. Her wolf was a ghost, a silent passenger in her own body. But here, in the heart of the wolf kingdom, the ghost was stirring. The grand hall was a vision of overwhelming opulence. Banners of midnight black and silver, emblazoned with the snarling wolf crest of the royal house, hung from beams high above. The air was thick with the scent of hundreds of powerful werewolves, a musky, potent aroma of pine, frost, and raw dominance that made her head spin. Underlying it was the cloying sweetness of winter blossoms and the crisp, clean smell of lavender, but these were mere decorations on the overwhelming fragrance of power. She moved like a wisp of smoke through the crowd, her shoulders hunched, her gaze fixed on the intricate patterns of the marble floor. The guests around her were a symphony of confidence. Males with broad shoulders and assessing eyes, females with elegant gowns and sharp, knowing smiles. Their laughter was a sound of belonging, a language she had never learned. She could feel their gazes flick over her, not with malice, but with a casual, unthinking dismissal. She was plain, her dress simple, her presence unremarkable. It was the greatest protection she had. She spotted an empty chair tucked against a pillar near the back of the hall, a slice of shadow in the glittering expanse. It was perfect. She slipped into it, folding her hands in her lap, making herself small. She focused on her breathing, on the rough texture of her dress under her fingertips, on anything to anchor herself against the tide of alien energy that threatened to pull her under. The ceremony was about to begin. Soon, it would be over. Soon, she could return to her anonymity. The heavy, iron-banded doors at the far end of the hall swung open with a groan that silenced the room more effectively than any command. The air itself seemed to still, to draw in a collective breath. And then he entered. Alpha King Kalin. Lyra had heard the stories, of course. Every child in Veora, human and wolf alike, knew the legends. The boy king who had taken the throne after his parents were assassinated in a bloody coup. The warrior who, at 16, had rallied the fractured packs and decimated the army of traitors. The ruler who had forged a fragile peace between wolf and human territories, a peace maintained by the sheer, unyielding force of his will. But the stories had not prepared her for the reality of him. He moved with a predator's economy, each step a statement of absolute authority. He was tall, his frame a testament to strength and battle-honed grace, clad in black armor etched with silver that seemed to drink the light from the room. His hair, the color of a raven's wing, fell in untamed waves to his shoulders, framing a face of harsh, beautiful lines, a sharp jaw, a blade-straight nose, and a mouth set in a firm, impassive line. It was his eyes, however, that held the room captive. They were the color of molten gold, burning with an inner fire that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. They scanned the crowd, and Lyra felt a primal urge to lower her own gaze, to bare her throat in submission. This was not just a king, this was an apex predator, and every soul in the hall was prey in his domain. Her heart, which had been pounding, seemed to stop entirely. She dropped her eyes to the floor, focusing on a single, tiny crack in the marble, pouring every ounce of her will into the prayer. Don't see me. Don't see me. Don't see me. The procession began. Kalin walked down the central aisle, his presence a wave that caused the assembled nobles to bow their heads as he passed. Lyra kept her gaze down, counting his footsteps. They were steady, measured, the sound of destiny unfolding. Then, they faltered. The footsteps slowed, hesitated, stopped. A cold dread, sharper than any winter wind, pierced her chest. She could feel the weight of a stare, heavy and intent, like a physical pressure on the top of her head. The silence in the hall was no longer one of respect, it was the silence of a forest when a hawk circles overhead. It was the silence of anticipation. Against every screaming instinct, her eyes lifted. His golden gaze was locked directly on her. The world dissolved. The glittering hall, the murmuring crowd, the scent of lavender and power, it all faded into a distant hum. There was only the terrifying intensity of his stare. In the depths of his eyes, she saw the expected power, the royal command, but beneath it, something else flickered. A spark of confusion. A dawning, perplexed recognition that was more frightening than anger. He took a step toward her. Then another. The crowd parted for him like wheat before a scythe, their faces a mixture of shock and curiosity. He was deviating from the sacred procession. For her. He stood before her chair, his shadow falling over her, engulfing her. Lyra was frozen, a rabbit caught in the gaze of a wolf. Her breath was trapped in her lungs, her muscles locked. She could smell him now, a scent of frost-kissed forests, of dark earth, of ozone after a lightning strike. It was a scent that was somehow familiar, a haunting melody from a forgotten dream. You. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated not in her ears, but deep in her bones, stirring the ghost of her wolf from its slumber. She flinched. You aren't like the others. The words were not spoken loudly, but in the absolute quiet, they echoed like a shout. They were not an accusation, yet they felt like a condemnation. They settled on her shoulders with the weight of a mountain, threatening to crush her. Somehow, she found the strength to stand. Her legs trembled violently, and she gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy thing. I didn't mean to intrude. Kalin's head tilted slightly, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe, dissecting her. His expression was an unreadable mask of royal composure, though the intensity of his stare softened by a minuscule fraction. You're not intruding, he stated, his voice calm, factual. But something is different about you. He inhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, his nostrils flaring slightly. Your scent. Panic. Pure, undiluted, ice-cold panic flooded her veins. The scent. He can smell it. He can smell the human in me. The impurity. Her mother's warning screamed in her mind. This was it. The moment she had spent her whole life avoiding. Exposure. Judgment. Exile. Or worse. Your scent is. Kalin inhaled again, his brow furrowing in a rare display of open confusion. He was a master of his world, and he had encountered something he could not immediately categorize. It's familiar. Her stomach twisted into a knot of pure terror. The air grew thick, heavy with the unspoken truth that hung between them. He couldn't place it, but he knew it was wrong. He knew she didn't belong. I'm not who you think I am, Your Majesty, she said, the words tumbling out in a rushed, desperate whisper. She took a step back, wanting to put distance between herself and his overwhelming presence. I'm just a guest. I have no place here. He studied her for a long, agonizing moment, his golden eyes seeming to strip away the layers of her simple dress, her humble demeanor, her fear, seeing straight down to the sack. Ret she held in her blood. You're no ordinary guest, he declared, his voice dropping to a low, intimate timbre that was meant for her ears alone. The statement was a death knell. Lyra took another involuntary step back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had to get out. She had to run, to flee back to the shadows where she was safe. I should go, she whispered, her voice shaking so badly she could barely form the words. I'm sorry for disturbing you. She turned, a frantic movement born of pure survival instinct, but his voice stopped her before she could take a single step. Stay, please. The word, please, was a shock that reverberated through her entire being. It was not the command of a king, but the request of a man. A plea that held a confusion that mirrored her own. It was a sound of vulnerability from a figure she had believed was carved from stone and will. It was that single word that rooted her to the spot more effectively than any roar of command could have. She turned back, slowly, to face him. The air between them seemed to crackle, alive with an unspoken tension, a magnetic pull she didn't understand but could feel in the very marrow of her bones. Her instincts screamed danger, but her wolf, that hidden, wild part of her, stirred with a strange, compelling curiosity, a longing to step closer to that haunting, frost and ozone scent. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, they simply stared at one another, two strangers bound by an invisible thread in a silent hall of witnesses. The entire kingdom of Veora had faded away. There was only the king, the half-breed, and the terrifying, unanswerable question hanging in the air between them. Finally, Kalin broke the silence, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. You are more than you let on, aren't you? Lyra's mouth was desert dry. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His presence was a storm, overwhelming and powerful, yet she could feel his genuine, probing curiosity. It was a fascination that went beyond her strange scent, as if he were trying to see past her walls, past her fear, and into the hidden soul she had kept locked away for so long. He didn't press for an answer. He simply gave her one last, lingering look, the gold in his eyes seeming to swirl with unasked questions. "Let's talk later," he said, the command returning to his tone, though it was now tempered with something that sounded almost like anticipation. "There's much we need to discuss." He didn't wait for her agreement. He turned, his dark cloak swirling around his boots like a living shadow, and continued his walk to the dais, as if a world-shattering interruption had never occurred. The spell was broken. The noise of the hall rushed back in, louder than before. Now buzzing with speculation and whispered questions. The weight of hundreds of stares pressed down on her, sharp and accusing. But the only gaze she still felt was his, a phantom touch branding the spot where she stood. As she sank back into her chair, her body trembling uncontrollably, Lyra knew with a terrifying, absolute certainty. Her life, her carefully constructed world of shadows and silence, had just been irrevocably shattered. She was caught in the orbit of the Alpha King, and the collision had only just begun. The ceremony continued around her, a sacred ritual of fate and bonding, but she was no longer a spectator. She had become the central mystery, and she had no idea if she would survive the unraveling. The ceremony was a blur of color and sound, a distant play Lyra watched from behind a pane of glass. The Alpha King sat on his obsidian throne, a statue of regal power, yet she could feel the occasional weight of his gaze like a physical touch, a brand upon her skin. Each time, a fresh wave of heat would flood her cheeks, and she would fix her eyes on the intricate carvings of the pillar beside her, counting the grooves until the sensation faded. When the final binding vow was spoken and the hall erupted into a more relaxed, celebratory cacophony, Lyra did not wait. She moved, a ghost slipping through the cracks of the merry crowd, her only goal the towering arched doors that led to the outside. She needed air that wasn't thick with perfume and power. She needed the sky. The palace gardens were a testament to controlled wilderness. Manicured hedges gave way to wilder, moon-drenched groves of silver-leafed trees and night-blooming flowers that glowed with a soft, ethereal light. The air was cool and clean, scented of damp earth and jasmine. Lyra stumbled away from the palace's golden glow, following a gravel path until the sounds of the feast faded into a distant hum. She found a secluded stone bench nestled between two ancient oaks, their branches weaving a canopy against the sky. She collapsed onto it, her legs finally giving way. Wrapping her arms around herself, she began to tremble, the full force of the evening's terror finally crashing down. He had smelled her, the one thing she had spent a lifetime concealing, and the most powerful wolf in the kingdom had pinpointed it in a single breath. What would he do? Banish her? Imprison her? The stories of his justice were never gentle. Lyra? The voice, soft and familiar, made her jump. Alara stood at the entrance to the small clearing, her elegant cerulean gown seeming to capture the moonlight. Her face, usually bright with laughter, was etched with concern. "Alara," Lyra breathed, her voice shaky. I needed a moment." "You vanished," Alara said, moving to sit beside her. The bench was cold, but her presence was a warmth Lyra desperately needed. "Everyone is talking. No one knows who you are. They're calling you the King's Mystery." She paused, her delicate features tightening. "What happened, Lyra? What did he say to you?" A sob caught in Lyra's throat. She shook her head, unable to form the words. How could she explain the terrifying intensity in Kalin's eyes, the way his voice had seemed to resonate in her very soul? He noticed my scent," Lyra whispered, the confession feeling like a betrayal of her mother's final wish. Alara's eyes widened. "He what? But, how? You've always been so careful." "No one has ever. I don't know." Lyra cried, the words bursting forth. "He just stopped. He looked right at me and he knew. He said I was different. He said my scent was familiar." She buried her face in her hands. "He wants to talk to me later." "Oh, Alara, what have I done? I never should have come. I've put you in danger." "Shish," Alara soothed, wrapping an arm around Lyra's shoulders. "You've done nothing wrong. This is not your fault." She hesitated, her gaze turning thoughtful. "The king, he is a law unto himself. His senses are said to be keener than any wolf in 10 generations. Perhaps it was inevitable. Inevitable that I would be discovered? That I would be cast out?" Lyra's voice was thick with despair. "Or perhaps it was inevitable that he would be the one to find you," Alara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. There are stories, old tales my grandmother used to tell, whispered in the dead of night when the fires burned low. Lyra lifted her head, intrigued despite her fear. What tales? Prophecies, Alara said, the word hanging in the air like a spell. That a king would arise who was both destroyer and savior. That his true mate would not be found among the pure-blooded elite, but would be a child of two worlds, a bridge between wolf and human. Their bond would either unite the kingdom in a golden age or shatter it into dust. Lyra stared at her, the blood draining from her face. No, Alara, that's just a story. A fairy tale for pups. It can't be, he can't think that why not? Alara pressed, her eyes earnest. He scented you across a crowded hall filled with the most powerful wolves in Veora. He stopped a sacred ceremony for you. He asked you to stay. The Alpha King does not do such things on a whim, Lyra. The idea was so colossal, so terrifyingly absurd, that Lyra's mind recoiled from it. She was Lyra, the half-breed orphan. She was not a prophesied queen. She was a mistake. Before she could form a protest, a new scent washed over the clearing, one that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end, frost and ozone. The air grew dense, charged. Both women turn. Alpha King Kalin stood at the edge of the path, his formal armor replaced by a simple, dark tunic and trousers. Out of his royal trappings, he seemed both more approachable and more dangerously primal. The moonlight silvered the sharp planes of his face, and his golden eyes glowed like embers in the dim light. He was alone. Alara, he said, his voice a quiet rumble that acknowledged her presence without truly seeing her. Would you give us a moment? It was a dismissal, gentle but absolute. Alara shot Lyra a wide-eyed, uncertain look, then dipped into a quick curtsy. Of course, Your Majesty. She squeezed Lyra's hand once, a silent message of solidarity, and then melted back into the shadows of the garden. And then they were alone. Lyra's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She stood up, her body tensed for flight, but his gaze held her captive. He did not approach immediately, simply studied her from a distance, as if she were a rare and skittish creature he did not wish to startle. You make a habit of fleeing my company, he observed, his tone dry, but not unkind. I wasn't fleeing, Your Majesty. I just needed quiet. I see. He took a step forward, then another, closing the distance between them with a predator's fluid grace. He stopped a few feet away, a respectful distance, yet she could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell the clean, wild scent of his skin. It was doing strange things to her equilibrium, making her head feel light. The scent you carry, he began, his gaze intense. It's unlike any I've ever encountered. It's haunting. Lyra stiffened, her walls slamming back into place. I'm sorry if it offends you. The words were barely a whisper. A faint, almost imperceptible frown touched his lips. It doesn't offend me. Quite the opposite. I can't seem to understand it. You. He gestured to the bench. May I? Stunned, she could only nod. The Alpha King was asking her permission. He sat, not touching her, but his proximity was a storm cloud of energy. The space on the bench between them felt like a chasm and a precipice all at once. You don't have to understand me, she said, finding a sliver of courage. I don't belong here, Your Majesty. I don't belong in this world of pure wolves and powerful kings. I'm just different. He was silent for a long moment, his profile stark in the moonlight. I don't believe in fate, he said, his voice low. I never have. I was raised on stories of destined mates, of bonds written in the stars. I always thought it was a convenient myth, a way to make wolves behave, to give them a purpose beyond their own ambition. Lyra's breath hitched. But you don't believe that now? She dared to ask. He turned his head, and his golden eyes captured hers. In the intimate darkness of the garden, they seemed softer, less like burning embers and more like pools of liquid gold. No, he said quietly. I don't believe in fate. But I believe in you. The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. They were simple, direct, and utterly devastating. You don't know me. I know that you are brave, he said. It takes courage to come here, to a place where you feel you don't belong, for the sake of a friend. I know that you are strong. I can see it in the way you hold yourself, even when you are afraid. And I know that your scent calls to something in me that has been silent my entire life. Tears welled in Lyra's eyes, blurring his image. "I don't want to be a prophecy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be the answer to some old legend. I'm not ready for that." To her astonishment, his expression softened, the hard lines of his face easing into something that looked like shared pain. "Neither am I," he confessed, the admission sounding torn from him. "But sometimes we don't have a choice in the matter. Our destinies are shaped by forces beyond our control." The vulnerability in his voice undid her. This was not the invincible king from the stories. This was a man, burdened by a crown he never asked for, as lost and uncertain as she was. "I can't promise you a happy ending," Kalin said, his gaze unwavering. "My life is one of duty and danger. There are threats to this kingdom you cannot yet imagine. But I can promise you that I will be here, whether you're ready or not." It was not a declaration of love. It was a statement of fact. A vow of presence. And in that moment, it was more powerful, more real, than any flowery promise could have been. Lyra opened her mouth, 1,000 questions, 1,000 fears on her tongue. But the words wouldn't come. All she could do was look at him, at this magnificent, lonely king who saw the very thing she had hidden from the world, and not recoil from it, but was drawn to it. "Will you stay?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, an echo of his plea in the hall. "Just for tonight? There's no need to run anymore." Everything in her, every instinct of self-preservation honed over a lifetime, screamed at her to refuse, to turn and run back to the safety of her obscurity. But something deeper, something ancient and powerful that felt like the first stirrings of her own wolf, urged her to stay. It was a pull towards him, a gravitational force she was powerless to resist. She took a shallow, trembling breath. "Okay," she whispered, "I'll stay." A single, slow nod was his only response, but in the depths of his golden eyes, she saw a flicker of something that looked like relief. For a moment, the world held its breath. The future itself seemed to pause, waiting for the two of them to take the next step into the unknown, together. The night had deepened, the moon a sharp silver claw in the sky, by the time Lyra found herself walking back towards the palace, not to the feast, but to the guest chambers Alara had arranged for her. Kalin had escorted her in silence, his presence a protective, unsettling shield against the curious glances of the few courtiers still wandering the corridors. At her door, he had simply bowed his head, a gesture so shockingly respectful it left her speechless, and melted back into the shadows. Sleep was impossible. She paced the opulent room, her mind a whirlwind of golden eyes, whispered prophecies, and the devastating weight of a king's belief. "I believe in you." The words played on a loop, each repetition sending a new shiver down her spine. How could he, who had everything, saw something in her, who had nothing? A sharp, official rap on her door made her jump. It was too early for Alara. Cautiously, she opened it to find a stern-faced guardsman in the livery of the royal house. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the council chamber," he stated, his tone impersonal. Dread, cold and slick, coiled in her stomach. The council chamber. This was it, the moment of judgment. He had thought on it, discussed it with his advisors, and realized his mistake. She was to be formally reprimanded, her status as an outsider made official. With legs that felt like water, she followed the guard through a maze of torchlit corridors, each step taking her deeper into the heart of the beast's lair. They arrived at a set of massive, ironwood doors carved with scenes of legendary battles. The guard pushed them open and announced, "The Lady Lyra." The room that lay before her was designed to intimidate. It was circular, with a high, domed ceiling from which a massive iron chandelier hung, its candles casting a flickering, dramatic light. In the center was a round table of polished obsidian, so dark it seemed to be a hole into nothingness. Seated around it were a dozen of the most powerful-looking werewolves Lyra had ever seen. Their collective aura was a physical pressure, a wall of dominance that made it hard to breathe. They were all alphas or elders, their faces etched with the lines of power and responsibility. Their scents, of iron, of old forests, of different packs and territories, clashed in the air, a symphony of barely restrained power. And at the head of it all, sat Kalin. He was every inch the king again, his expression carved from granite, his golden eyes sweeping over the council with cool authority. He did not look at her as she entered, and the omission felt like a rejection. "Come forward, Lyra of the outskirts," said a deep, gravelly voice. An older wolf with a grizzled beard and eyes. The color of flint gestured to an empty chair beside Kalin. It was not an invitation, it was a command. She moved forward on trembling legs, painfully aware of every stare, every silent judgment. She could smell their suspicion, their confusion, their outright hostility. She took the seat, her back rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their shaking. "This is the girl?" a sleek, sharp-faced female alpha with silver-streaked hair asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "The one who disrupted the mating ceremony. She smells peculiar. Her scent is not the subject of this council, Livia," Kalin said, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. The authority in it was absolute. The female alpha, Livia, narrowed her eyes but fell silent. "Then what is the subject, Your Majesty?" asked the grizzled elder who had spoken first. Lyra would learn his name was Gideon, the alpha of the Stoneclaw pack and the most traditionalist voice on the council. "We were summoned from our beds for an emergency session. The Eastern Border Scouts have reported increased movement among the rogue packs. This is what demands our attention, not some stray you found intriguing." A murmur of agreement rippled around the table. Lyra felt her face burn with shame. A stray. That was all she was to them. "The stray," Kalin said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is precisely why the eastern border is relevant." He finally turned his head, and his gaze locked with Lyra's. It was not the soft, searching look from the garden. It was the assessing, strategic gaze of a general. "Tell the council what you told me, Eric." From the shadows behind Kalin's chair, a man stepped forward. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and keen, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He was dressed not in armor, but in practical, dark clothing. This was Eric, the king's spymaster and most trusted advisor. "My lords, ladies," Eric began, his voice calm and precise. "The rogue packs, led by a wolf named Torvin, have been growing bolder for months. We believed it was simple banditry, a hunger for territory. Our scouts intercepted a messenger last night. The message was not about territory. It was about blood." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Torvin is not just gathering disgruntled wolves. He is rallying them under a new banner. A banner of purity. He claims the royal line has grown weak, that our king is distracted by impure influences." Eric's eyes flicked to Lyra for a fraction of a second. "He speaks of a half-breed shadow that has fallen over the throne. He claims it is his sacred duty to cleanse the kingdom." The silence in the room was deafening. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face, a cold numbness spreading through her limbs. It was worse than she could have ever imagined. Her mere existence was being used as a rallying cry for war. Gideon slammed a heavy fist on the table, the obsidian ringing with the impact. "I knew it. I told you, Kalin. Your fascination with this human-tainted girl is a liability. You have given Torvin the perfect weapon. He will use her to turn every traditional pack against you. She has done nothing." Kalin's voice rose, not in a shout, but in a low, thunderous growl that vibrated through the floor. The candles in the chandelier flickered. "She is a subject of Veora, living peacefully in the outskirts. Her blood does not dictate her loyalty. Torvin seeks an excuse for a war he has desired for years. He would have found one regardless." "Perhaps," Livia sneered, "but he has found a powerful one. The purity of the royal line is the bedrock of our society. To have the king himself consorting with a half-breed, it undermines everything we stand for. The packs will be divided. Your own authority will be questioned. Then they will learn the price of questioning me," Kalin said, his eyes flashing with a feral light. The raw power rolling off him was so intense that several of the council members instinctively leaned back. "The point is, the threat is real and imminent," Eric interjected, trying to steer the conversation back to strategy. "Torvin's forces are gathering in the Blackwood Forest. They are organized and armed. We must act. Then we ride out and crush them," a younger, fiery-eyed alpha declared. "And in doing so," Kalin said, his voice returning to its cool, controlled tone, "we would leave the capital vulnerable, and we would play directly into Torvin's narrative. That I am a brute who crushes dissent with violence, a king who has turned his back on the old ways. This is not just a military conflict. It is a war for the soul of Veora." He turned his gaze back to Lyra, and this time, it was different. It was not the look of a king to a subject, or a general to a pawn. It was a look of shared burden. Lyra is the key, Kalin stated, and the council erupted into protests. Silence, he roared, and the room obeyed instantly. He looked at each council member in turn. Torvin uses her as a symbol of corruption. We will show the kingdom that she is a symbol of something else. Of strength that comes from embracing all of Veora, not just a part of it. She will not be hidden away in shame. She will stand beside me. Lyra's heart stopped. Stand beside him? In front of the entire kingdom? It was her worst nightmare made real. Your Majesty, you cannot be serious, Gideon sputtered, his face purple with rage. To parade her, she is my guest, and under my protection. Kalin cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. And you will all treat her with the respect that entails. The decision is made. We prepare for war, but we will fight it on our terms. We ride for the border at first light. Lyra will accompany us. The council was too stunned to speak. Kalin stood, the meeting clearly over. Eric, make the preparations. Gideon, mobilize the Stoneclaw pack. Livia, the Nightfall pack is with you. We move as one. As the council members filed out, shooting Lyra looks of pure venom, she remained seated, paralyzed. Kalin waited until the room was empty save for the two of them and Eric. He walked over to her and crouched down before her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate after the brutality of the council meeting, that a tear finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. I am sorry, he said, his voice low and earnest. I had to do it that way. They needed to see that my will is absolute. That I will not be swayed by their prejudice. You've made me a target, she whispered, her voice raw. You've painted a target on my back for every wolf in this kingdom who believes in Torvin's cause. I have, he admitted, his golden eyes holding hers, refusing to let her look away. But I have also placed you under the protection of the crown. To get to you, they must go through me. And I have given you a choice. A choice? She laughed, a hollow, broken sound. What choice? To be hated and hunted if I stay, or to run and be hunted anyway? The choice to be more, he said intently. The choice to stop hiding. The choice to fight for a place in this world, not just beg for a corner of it. You told me you didn't want to be a prophecy. So don't be. Be Lyra. But be the Lyra who is brave enough to stand her ground. He stood, his presence once again filling the space. We leave at dawn. Eric will provide you with suitable clothing. Get some rest. He and Eric left the chamber, leaving her alone in the vast, intimidating room. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, suffocating her. She could run now, under cover of darkness. She could disappear back into the forests and maybe, just maybe, evade the war that was coming. But as she sat there, the ghost of his belief in her, the memory of his vow, I will be here, warred with a lifetime of fear. And for the first time, a new emotion began to kindle in the cold ashes of her terror. A spark of defiance. She was tired of being afraid. She was tired of being nothing. She looked at the empty chair where the Alpha King had sat, where he had defended her against his entire council. Slowly, she stood up. Her legs were steady. She would not run. Dawn arrived not with a gentle light, but with the harsh, metallic clang of armor and the impatient snorts of war horses. Lyra stood in the courtyard, a small, still figure amidst a controlled Hurricane O.F. activity. She wore the practical, dark gray riding leathers Eric had provided, the material stiff and unfamiliar against her skin. They felt like a costume for a role she had no idea how to play. The war party was a formidable sight. 200 of the king's personal guard, the Onyx Guard, were mounted on massive, dark-coated horses, their armor gleaming dully in the pale light. Banners bearing the royal snarling wolf snapped in the brisk wind. Mixed among them were the warriors from the various council packs, the burly, axe-wielding Stoneclaws, the sleek, silent Nightfall hunters. The air was thick with the scent of steel, horse, and the aggressive, eager energy of wolves preparing for a fight. She felt their eyes on her. Whispers slithered through the ranks like poisonous snakes. The half-breed, the king's pet, Torvin's excuse. She kept her chin up, her gaze fixed on the towering gates of the city, trying to project a confidence she was light years from feeling. A sudden hush fell over the courtyard. Kalin emerged from the palace, and the very atmosphere shifted to accommodate him. He was clad not in the ornate armor of the ceremony, but in functional, scarred battleplate, a greatsword strapped to his back. His cloak was simple black wool. He looked less like a king and more like a force of nature, his golden eyes scanning his troops with a sharp, assessing gaze that missed nothing. His eyes found hers across the crowded space. He gave a single, curt nod. It was not a greeting of affection, but an acknowledgement of a fellow soldier. In order to be ready. Then he swung onto the back of a colossal black stallion with effortless grace. Eric, mounted on a lighter, quicker horse, trotted over to her. "Your mount, my lady," he said, gesturing to a calm-looking dun mare. "Her name is Willow. She is steady and will not spook easily." Lyra murmured her thanks and managed to haul herself into the saddle, her movements clumsy compared to the fluidity of the warriors around her. As she settled, the column began to move with a ground-shaking rumble. They passed through the gates of Athel, and the sprawling city gave way to the rugged, open countryside of Veora. The march was a lesson in endurance. They moved at a relentless pace, stopping only briefly to water the horses and for short, tense rests. Lyra, used to the gentle rhythms of her garden and the quiet forests, was pushed to her limits. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest, but she gritted her teeth and bore it, refusing to ask for special treatment. Kalin was always at the head of the column, a distant, commanding figure. But she would sometimes feel his gaze on her during their stops, a silent check on her well-being. He never approached, never spoke to her. He was the Alpha King now, fully immersed in his role as commander. It was Eric who became her taciturn companion. He would ride beside her for stretches, pointing out landmarks in his dry, factual way. The River Sorrow. It marks the end of the Central Territories. Or, those hills are riddled with old mine shafts. A good place for an ambush, which is why we are avoiding them. On the second day, as they entered the foothills of the Blackwood, he finally broached the subject everyone was thinking about. "Torvin was a captain in the Onyx Guard," Eric said, his voice low. "A good one. Fiercely loyal to Kalin's father." "What happened?" Lyra asked, her voice hoarse from dust and disuse. "The same thing that happens to many," Eric replied, his eyes scanning the tree line. He believed the old king was too soft, too willing to compromise with the human settlements. When Kalin took the throne and continued his father's policies, Torvin saw it as a betrayal of everything it means to be a wolf. He was stripped of his rank for insubordination. He disappeared into the eastern wilds and started gathering others who felt disenfranchised. Your appearance has simply given him a powerful symbol to unite them. "So I am the spark," Lyra said bitterly, on a pyre that was already built. "You are a convenient excuse," Eric corrected. The pyre was built of ambition, resentment, and a twisted sense of tradition. "Do not blame yourself for the crimes of others." His words were logical, but they did little to ease the guilt festering inside her. That night, they made camp on a windswept plateau overlooking the vast, dark expanse of the Blackwood forest. It was a brooding, ancient place, the trees so densely packed they formed an impenetrable wall of shadow. Fires were lit, and the mood around them was grim and focused. Lyra found a spot away from the main circle of warriors, leaning against a rock and chewing on a piece of tough dried meat. She felt a presence and looked up. Kalin stood there, holding 2 tin cups. He handed one to her. It contained a rough, spiced wine that burned its way down her throat, warming her from the inside. "You are holding up well," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't sit, but stood looking out over the forest, his profile stark against the firelight. "It's not by choice," she admitted, too tired to lie. A faint, almost smile touched his lips. "The best courage rarely is." He was silent for a moment. The scouts report Torvin's main force is camped deep in the heart of the wood, near the ruins of an old fortress. "We will engage them tomorrow." Fear, cold and sharp, lanced through her. "And what is my role in this engagement, Your Majesty? Am I to stand at the back and be a symbol?" He turned to look at her then, his golden eyes reflecting the flames. "You are to stay with Eric. You will be safe." "Safe?" A sudden, unexpected anger flared within her. "You dragged me from my home, presented me to your council as a political statement, and marched me to the edge of a battlefield, and now you tell me to be safe? What is the point of all this if I am just to be a banner in a box?" His eyes narrowed, intrigued by her outburst. What would you have me do? Give you a sword? You are not a warrior, Lyra. No, I'm not, she shot back, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and desperation. But I'm not a porcelain doll either. You said you believed in me. So believe that I can handle more than just being a passive burden. My whole life I've used my wits to survive. Let me use them now. He studied her, the intensity of his gaze making her feel laid bare. He was seeing the fire she usually kept banked, the stubborn will that had allowed a half-breed orphan to survive in a world that wanted her to fail. What are you suggesting? He asked quietly. I don't know, she confessed, the anger draining away, leaving only exhaustion. But there has to be something other than just waiting to be a victim or a prize. Before he could respond, a frantic howl tore through the night, followed by another. It was the alarm. Kalin's head snapped up, his body tensing. In an instant, the thoughtful man was gone, replaced by the Battle King. They're here, he growled. Chaos erupted. Warriors scrambled for their weapons. Shouts and snarls filled the air. Eric materialized at her side, his face grim. It's an ambush. They've flanked us. He grabbed Willow's reins. Stay close to me. But the camp was a maelstrom. A group of rough-looking rogue wolves, their eyes wild with bloodlust, burst from the tree line on their side of the camp, howling Torvin's name. They crashed into the royal forces with terrifying force. Lyra lost sight of Eric in the confusion. A rogue, smelling of unwashed fur and madness, lunged at her, his claws extended. She froze, pure instinct taking over. But her instinct was not to fight. It was to run, to hide. Her wolf, the ghost she had suppressed for so long, surged to the surface. A strange calm descended over her. The world seemed to slow down. The snarls of the wolves, the clang of steel, the panicked whinnies of the horses, it all faded into a dull roar. Her senses sharpened to an impossible degree. She could smell the individual scents of every wolf in the fray. She could hear the heartbeat of the rogue lunging for her, a frantic, feverish rhythm. And she could smell Kalin, a beacon of frost and ozone and furious power, cutting a swath through the enemy to get to her. The rogue was almost upon her. Without thinking, without a sound, Lyra moved. It wasn't a trained dodge. It was a fluid, instinctual shift of her body, a twist that was more animal than human. The rogue's claws whistled through the air where her throat had been. He stumbled, off balance, surprise flashing in his feral eyes. In that split second of his confusion, Lyra didn't strike. She looked past him, her enhanced vision piercing the chaos. She saw the strategy of the ambush, the weak point in the rogue's line where a concentrated push from the Onyx Guard could split them in two. Eric, she screamed, her voice cutting through the din with an authority she didn't know she possessed. She pointed. The left flank. Their line is thin there. Eric, who had been fighting his way toward her, followed her pointing finger. He saw it immediately. He barked an order, and a unit of the guard pivoted, slamming into the rogue's weak point with brutal efficiency. The tide of the skirmish turned. The rogue ambush, now outmaneuvered, was quickly surrounded and subdued. As the last of the rogues were disarmed, a sudden silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of the fires. Every eye turned to Lyra. She stood panting, her body trembling with the aftermath of the adrenaline and the shocking, unbidden emergence of her wolf. She had not fought, but she had not run. She had seen. Kalin stood a few feet away, his sword dripping with dark blood, his chest heaving. He was staring at her, his golden eyes wide with something that was beyond surprise, beyond curiosity. It was a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. He walked toward her, his steps slow, deliberate. The warriors parted for him, their expressions a mixture of awe and confusion. He stopped in front of her. The Battle King was gone again. In his place was the man from the garden, the one who saw her. You said you weren't a warrior, he said, his voice hushed, as if in a sacred space. Lyra met his gaze, her own heart pounding a wild, triumphant rhythm. The ghost was no longer a ghost. It was a part of her. And for the first time, she was not afraid of it. I'm not, she whispered. I'm a survivor. And in the depths of his eyes, she saw the belief he had professed in the garden solidify into an unshakable, terrifying certainty. The bridge between two worlds had just taken her first, unsteady step. And the Alpha King was watching, ready to cross it with her. The real war, for the soul of Veora and for her own, had truly begun. Great, now write next 3 chapters with full of emotional, of course. Here are the next 3 chapters, focusing on the deep emotional turmoil and evolving bond between Lyra and Kalin. Silence, in the wake of violence, had a weight all its own. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket smothering the plateau. The adrenaline that had sharpened Lyra's senses into a weapon bled away, leaving her hollow and trembling. The coppery tang of blood was a thick fog in the air, mingling with the scent of fear and pine. Around her, the warriors of the Onyx Guard moved with grim efficiency, checking the fallen and securing the perimeter, but their eyes kept flicking back to her. She could feel their gazes like physical touches. Not the hostile stares of the council, but something new, something unsettled and assessing. She had not raised a blade, yet she had shifted the battle. Her hands were clean, but her soul felt stained. Kalin had not moved. He stood before her, a statue of war and wonder, his golden eyes seeing straight through the fragile shell of her composure. The intensity of his focus was a brand. How? The single word was rough, stripped bare of royal authority, filled with a raw need to understand. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself, a feeble defense against the cold and the staring. I don't know. Her voice was a threadbare whisper. I just saw it. Like a path in the forest. The weak point, it was just there. Eric materialized from the chaos, his usual calm demeanor fractured by a spark of pure, intellectual fascination. It was a textbook tactical assessment, he said, his voice low and urgent as he looked at Kalin. Executed in a split second, under direct threat. I've seen seasoned commanders fail to see what she did. His gaze shifted to Lyra, and for the first time, it held no trace of impersonal duty, but a dawning, profound respect. You have a gift, my lady. A gift. The word felt wrong. It felt like a curse. This thing, this wolf sense she had spent a lifetime caging, had burst free and it had helped. It had saved lives. The contradiction was a tempest in her mind. Her mother's warning warred with the approving look in Eric's eyes, with the stunned awe on the faces of the warriors. It's not a gift, she protested, her voice gaining a desperate strength. It's what I am. It's the thing I was told to never, ever show. She looked at Kalin, pleading for him to understand the turmoil inside her. My whole life, I was taught that this part of me was a shameful secret. That if it ever came out, it would mean danger. Exile. And now you're all looking at me like I've done something good. The conflict must have been plain on her face, because Kalin's own expression softened. The Battle King receded, and the man who had confessed his own disbelief in fate returned. He took a single step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of lighter gold in his irises, close enough that his scent of frost and ozone was a clean balm against the stench of blood. Your mother was trying to protect you, he said, his voice low, and for her alone. She lived in a world that was not ready for you. She wanted you to be safe. He paused, his gaze holding hers with an almost physical force. But you are not in that world anymore, Lyra. You are in my world. And in my world, the strength you hide is the very strength this kingdom needs. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in her eyes. They were not tears of fear now, but of a painful, terrifying liberation. It felt like a lifetime of chains had been shattered, and the sudden freedom was as terrifying as the captivity. It doesn't feel like strength, she choked out. It feels like I'm breaking. Sometimes, he said, his voice so quiet it was almost carried away by the wind, breaking is how we become whole. You are not the half-breed orphan from the outskirts anymore. You are Lyra, who sees what others cannot. And that. He reached out, then, not to touch her, but to gesture to the battlefield, to the men whose lives her gift had spared. That is not a curse. That is a power I have not seen in any wolf, pure blood or otherwise. His belief was an anchor in her storm. It was solid and unyielding. He was not asking her to be a prophecy. He was asking her to be herself. The full, unedited, powerful version of herself that she had never dared to imagine. Just then, a pained whimper cut through the emotional tension. One of the younger Stoneclaw warriors was kneeling beside a fallen comrade, a boy who couldn't have been more than 17. The boy's leg was torn open, blood pulsing from a deep gash. The camp healer was overwhelmed, tending to others with more grievous wounds. Without a second thought, Lyra moved. The argument, the fear, the existential crisis, it all faded into the background. This was something she knew. This was the other part of her, the part nurtured in her quiet garden. She knelt beside the wounded boy, ignoring the surprised look from the Stoneclaw warrior. "I can help," she said, her voice steady now. She looked at the warrior. "Get me clean water, bandages, and look for a plant with small, yellow star-shaped flowers and serrated leaves. It's called golden thread. It should be growing near the tree line." The warrior, his face pale with fear for his friend, just stared at her. "Now," Lyra commanded, and the authority in her voice brooked no argument. He scrambled to his feet and ran. Kalin and Eric watched, silent sentinels, as Lyra tore a strip from her own undershirt and began to clean the wound with the water from her own canteen. Her movements were sure, practiced. When the warrior returned with the plant, she crushed the leaves between her palms, releasing a sharp, clean scent, and packed the poultice into the wound before binding it tightly. "The bleeding will slow," she said to the boy, her voice gentle. "The poultice will fight infection. You will be all right." The young warrior looked up at her, his eyes wide with pain and something else, gratitude. "Thank you, my lady," he whispered. As she stood, she found Kalin watching her, his expression unreadable. He had seen the fierce tactician, and now he had seen the gentle healer. The two halves of her world, both emerging in the space of a single, brutal hour. He didn't speak. He simply offered a slow, deep nod. It was a recognition more profound than any words could convey. That night, as she tried to find sleep in her bedroll, the echoes of the battle were replaced by the echoes in her mind. The ghost was no longer a ghost. It was her. And for the first time, the thought was not accompanied by a surge of panic, but by a fragile, burgeoning sense of possibility. A low, soft howl rose from the edge of the camp. It was not a cry of alarm or aggression. It was a lonely, melodic note that hung in the cold air, a sound of mourning and respect for the fallen. It was Kalin's howl. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt an answering call rise in her own throat. She didn't let it out, but she felt it, a resonant hum in her soul, a connection to the king, to the pack, to the world she had always been taught to fear. She was breaking, and she was whole, all at once. And in the quiet of the night, she finally began to grieve for the girl she had been, and to fear the woman she was becoming. The blackwood forest swallowed them whole. The dense canopy blotted out the sun, casting the world below into a perpetual, gloomy twilight. The air was cold and still, heavy with the scent of decay and the watchful silence of ancient things. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig, was a potential threat. The easy confidence of the march was gone, replaced by a tense, predatory vigilance. Lyra felt it more keenly than anyone. Her newly awakened senses were a floodgate she had no idea how to close. The forest was a cacophony of information, the scuttling of insects under bark, the heartbeat of a bird nesting high above, the distant, musky scent of a bear. It was overwhelming, a constant static in her mind that threatened to short-circuit her thoughts. She rode beside Eric, her knuckles white on the reins. Kalin was a shadow at the head of the column, his presence a steady, calming beacon in the sensory storm, but he was distant, his focus entirely on the hunt for Torvin. "Breathe through it," Eric murmured, his voice a low, steady anchor. "Don't fight the input. Let it flow over you. Identify the threats and dismiss the rest. Your mind knows how, you've just never let it." She tried. She focused on the rhythm of Willow's gait, on the solid, practical scent of Eric beside her, on the unwavering signal of Kalin ahead. Slowly, the chaos began to order itself. She could separate the harmless sounds from the ones that warranted attention. It was like learning a new language, the native tongue of her wolf. They reached the ruins by midday. It was not a fortress so much as a skeletal reminder of one. Crumbling stone walls, choked with ivy and moss, stood in a clearing. The silence here was even deeper, a watchful, predatory silence. This was Torvin's lair, but it was empty. Kalin raised a fist, halting the column. He dismounted, his movements fluid and silent, and moved into the center of the ruins, his head lifted, sampling the air. Lyra and Eric followed. "They were here," Kalin growled, his voice tight with frustration. recently, but they're gone, scattered. He's toying with us, Eric said, his keen eyes scanning the surrounding trees. Drawing us deeper, wearing us down. Lyra stood still, letting the sensory information of the place wash over her. The scent of the rogue pack was strong, unwashed, aggressive, bitter with resentment. But underneath it, she caught another thread, faint and old. A scent of sorrow, of loss. Without conscious thought, she drifted away from the men, drawn to a half-collapsed archway that led into what might have been a great hall. The stone was cold beneath her fingertips. And then, a vision, sharp and sudden, flashed behind her eyes. Not a vision, a memory, not hers, laughter. The warm, robust laughter of a man with kind eyes and a crown of silver-flecked hair. A woman's gentle hand on her shoulder. The scent of baking bread and wood smoke. A sense of safety, of home. Then, fire. Screams. The clash of steel. The kind-eyed man falling, his blood stark on the stones. The same stones she was touching now. The woman's desperate cry, cut short. And a young voice, raging against the night, howling a vow of vengeance. A young Kalin. She gasped, snatching her hand back as if burned. The images vanished, but the echo of the emotions remained. The warmth, the safety, the shattering loss, the bottomless grief. Lyra? Kalin was at her side in an instant, his hand on her arm. What is it? What's wrong? She looked up at him, her eyes wide with the horror of what she had just witnessed. She could see it now, the ghost of that grieving boy in the face of the hardened king. This wasn't just a strategic location. This was the place where his world had ended. You, she whispered, her voice trembling. This is where it happened. Where your parents. Kalin's face went utterly still. The air around him grew cold. His grip on her arm tightened almost imperceptibly. How could you know that? The question was a low, dangerous whisper. That history is known only to a few. The official story places their death in the capital. I felt it, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. When I touched the stone. I saw it. I felt your father's laughter. Your mother's ache. And the fire, the blood? Her voice broke as she saw the raw, unguarded pain flash in his eyes. I felt your grief. For a long, terrible moment, he just stared at her, his expression a war between shock, suspicion, and a deep, ancient wound being brutally reopened. He had brought her here as a political symbol, a tool in his war. He had not brought her here to excavate the tombs of his past. He released her arm as if she were the one made of fire. He took a step back, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it might crack. The vulnerable man from the garden was gone, buried under layers of royal ice. What are you? He asked, and this time, the question was not filled with wonder, but with a sliver of fear. A king could not afford to be so transparent, so known. I don't know, Lyra cried, the emotional whiplash of the last 2 days crashing down on her. You keep asking me that. I'm just me. But when I'm near you, when I'm near these places, things happen. I see things. I feel things. It's your memories, Kalin. Your pain is in these stones, and I can feel it. Her use of his name, without title, hung in the air between them. A challenge. A plea. Eric watched the exchange, his face a mask of thoughtful concern. Empathic resonance, he murmured, more to himself than to them. A rare ability, even among seers. To not just sense emotion, but to tap into the emotional echoes left on a place, on a person. Kalin turned away from her, his broad shoulders tense. He was looking at the ruins, but Lyra knew he was seeing the ghosts of his past. She had violated his most sacred space, not by choice, but by her very nature. She had forced him to remember, and a king who lived in the past was a king who would not survive the present. We will make camp here for the night, he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the voice he used with his council. The voice of command. Search the ruins. Find me a trail. He walked away from her, leaving her standing alone by the archway, the cold weight of his memories and his sudden distance chilling her to the bone. She had thought breaking free of her own chains was the hard part. She hadn't realized that in doing so, she might inadvertently slam into the iron walls around his heart. The connection between them, which had felt so tangible and promising, now felt frayed and dangerous. She had seen the king, the warrior, and the man. And now, she had seen the wounded boy. And he had not wanted her to. As dusk began to bleed into the ruins, Lyra felt more alone than she ever had in the outskirts. The forest was not the only thing that was dark and full of hidden perils. The camp that night was a somber affair. The empty fortress was a psychological defeat, and the king's black mood cast a long shadow over Veora. Nay, he sat apart, near the remnants of a great hearth, sharpening his sword with a methodical, punishing rhythm. The sound was the only thing that broke the silence. Lyra kept her distance, huddled by a small fire with Eric. The memory of Kalin's pain was a fresh wound in her own soul. She hadn't meant to trespass. It had been an invasion, and the guilt was a bitter taste in her mouth. "He feels exposed," Eric said quietly, answering her unspoken thought. "For years, he has built walls around that part of his history. It is the foundation of his strength, but also his greatest vulnerability. To have someone feel it, it is like being disarmed." "I didn't mean to," Lyra whispered, staring into the flames. "I know," Eric said. "But intention rarely mitigates impact. Give him time. A wolf, when wounded, first snarls to keep others away. It is instinct." Later, when the camp had settled into an uneasy sleep and the moon was high, painting the ruins in silver and black, Lyra found she could not rest. The emotional residue of the place was a constant hum against her skin, a symphony of sorrow. She needed air, space. She slipped away from the fire and walked to the edge of the clearing, where a small, swift stream cut through the forest. She knelt, cupping the icy water in her hands and splashing it on her face, trying to wash away the feeling of Kalin's grief. She felt him before she heard him. His presence was a change in the air, a shift in the music of the night. She didn't turn. He came to stand beside her, staring down into the rushing water. The rhythmic scraping of his sword was gone. He was just a man, silhouetted by moonlight. "I was 12, he said, his voice quiet, the flat tone gone, replaced by a raw honesty that was more devastating. "We were here for the summer solstice. It was supposed to be safe. A hidden place. My father loved the quiet." He was silent for a long moment. "The traders came at dusk. They were led by a man my father called brother. I fought. I killed my first wolf that night. But it wasn't enough." Lyra remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. This was not an echo from a stone. This was a confession, willingly given. "I became king on a floor stained with my parents' blood," he continued, his gaze fixed on the water as if he could see the past reflected there. "The crown was not a prize. It was a weapon I had to learn to wield to survive. To make their deaths mean something. I have spent every day since ensuring that no one else would have to feel what I felt that night." He finally turned his head to look at her. "Until you." Tears streamed down Lyra's face, silent and warm. He wasn't accusing her. He was stating a fact. She had felt his pain, and in doing so, she had shared its weight. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick. "I wouldn't have chosen to see that. To hurt you." "I know," he said, echoing Eric's words. He took a step closer. "When you spoke of your mother, of her warning, I understood. You were taught to hide to survive. I was taught to arm myself to survive. We have both been prisoners of our past." He was building a bridge between them, not as a king to a subject, but as one wounded soul to another. The distance he had imposed earlier began to dissolve in the face of this shared understanding. "This ability you have," he said, gesturing vaguely around them. "It is a part of you. Like your scent. Like your courage. You cannot hide from it any more than I can hide from who I am." He paused, his golden eyes searching her face. "And I would not want you to." The words were an absolution. An acceptance of all that she was, even the parts that were frightening and unpredictable. "Torvin uses the past to fuel his hatred," Kalin said, his voice gaining strength. "He clings to an idea of purity that never truly existed. You feel the truth of the past. Its pain, but also its love. That is the memory we must fight for. Not a hollow ideal, but the messy, painful, beautiful reality of what we were, and what we can be." He was not just talking about the kingdom anymore. He was talking about the two of them. Lyra looked at him, truly looked at him. Not at the Alpha King, but at Kalin, the boy who had lost everything, the man who carried a kingdom on his shoulders, the wolf who was as terrified of his own heart as she was of her own power. And she was not afraid. "Then we will fight for it," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Together." A profound quiet settled between them, deeper and more peaceful than the silence of the forest. The chasm that had opened up hours before was gone, replaced by a new, unshakable solidity. They had seen the worst of each other's scars, and instead of turning away, they had recognized them as part of the same map. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The understanding that passed between them in that moment was a bond stronger than any physical embrace. They stood there by the stream, two halves of a whole that was only just beginning to understand its own shape, watching the water carry the past away into the dark, ready to face whatever the dawn would bring. JBTK story end nh hojati seri parts lik dine or last ending line dal diga jaza k subscribe like etc of course. I will now complete the entire story for you, writing all remaining chapters to bring this epic tale to a satisfying conclusion, followed by the ending line you requested. The trail from the ruins was not hard to find. Torvin, it seemed, had grown arrogant. He wanted to be followed. He led them deeper into the blackwood, to a place the trees grew so thick they blotted out the sky, and the air was thick with the scent of damp rot and dark magic. This was his true stronghold, a place not of stone, but of twisted nature. As they approached, the forest itself seemed to turn against them. Roots snaked up to trip the horses, and low-hanging branches swung down like claws. Whispers, faint and taunting, echoed from the shadows, playing on fears and insecurities. Lyra felt it all with a magnified intensity. The malevolent energy of the place was a physical pressure, a poison trying to seep into her soul. She saw warriors flinch, their resolve wavering. She saw the doubt in their eyes. Torvin was not just fighting with claws and steel, he was waging a war of fear. But Lyra was no longer the girl who hid from her senses. She closed her eyes, letting the wave of dark energy wash over her, and then through her. She did not resist it, she analyzed it. And beneath the hatred and the malice, she felt its core, not strength, but a deep, yawning emptiness. A hunger for a past that was a lie. He's afraid, she said, her voice cutting through the anxious murmurs. She opened her eyes and looked at Kalin. All of this, the tricks, the whispers, it's a mask. He's terrified that his vision of the world is wrong. He's more scared of your future than you or of his army. Her words, clear and certain, acted as a tonic. The warriors straightened, their fear replaced by a grim determination. Kalin looked at her, and in his eyes was a trust so complete it stole her breath. They broke through the final line of trees into a massive, natural amphitheater. And there, surrounded by his ragged army, stood Torvin. He was a large wolf, his once fine armor now scarred and mismatched, his face a roadmap of bitterness. But his eyes burned with a fanatical fire. Kalin, he roared, his voice echoing through the clearing. You finally come to face your judgment. You bring the corruption right to my door. Look at her, the living proof of your weakness. Kalin stepped forward, his presence calm and absolute. I bring proof that Veora is more than your narrow hatred, Torvin. I bring our future. The future? Torvin spat. A future watered down by human blood? A future where our strength is diluted into nothing? I fight for the past. For the pure, glorious past. Lyra could feel the lie in his words, a hollow echo. She stepped forward, beside Kalin. What past? She called out, her voice not loud, but carrying to every corner of the clearing. The past where a king was murdered by his own brother. The past drenched in blood and betrayal? That is the purity you fight for? A memory of pain? Her words, fueled by her empathic connection to the very history Torvin claimed to champion, struck him like a physical blow. He recoiled, his face twisting in rage and confusion. She was not arguing with him, she was reflecting his own hollow core back at him. Lies, he screamed. You know nothing, half-breed. I know the truth you feel in your heart, Lyra said, her gaze unwavering. The truth that this path leads only to more emptiness. Your war isn't for a kingdom. It's for a ghost. Her empathy became a weapon. She wasn't attacking his army, she was dismantling their leader's conviction. The rogue wolves shifted uneasily, their faith in Torvin's cause cracking under the weight of Lyra's piercing truth. With a howl of pure fury, Torvin shifted, his massive wolf form launching itself across the clearing, straight for Lyra. The battle was joined. Chaos erupted. The two armies collided in a storm of snarls, steel, and fury. Kalin met Torvin's charge mid-leap, a clash of alpha powers that sent a shockwave through the clearing. Lyra did not have a sword, but she had her gift. She became the eye of the storm, a calm center directing the flow of the battle. She stood on a slight rise, her senses expanded to their limit. Eric, left flank. They're trying to encircle the Stoneclaws, she shouted. Nightfall hunters, the archers in the trees. Take them out. Onyx guard, push forward. Their center is breaking. Her voice was a steady drumbeat of command, her every instruction precise and devastatingly effective. She saw the battle not as a melee, but as a living tapestry, and she wove the threads of their forces into a pattern of victory. The warriors, who had once looked at her with suspicion, now moved as one at her command, their trust in her tactical genius absolute. Meanwhile, the duel of the alphas was a terrifying spectacle. Kalin and Torvin were a blur of fang and claw, a brutal dance of power and hatred. But Torvin was fighting with rage, while Kalin fought with purpose. Kalin fought for a future. Lyra watched, her heart in her throat. She could feel Kalin's every surge of power, every dodge, every calculated strike. Their bond was a live wire, and through it, she felt the moment Torvin overextended, leaving a fleeting opening. She didn't shout a warning. She simply sent a pulse of certainty, of focus, down the bond that connected them. In that split second, Kalin moved. It was not a killing blow. He disarmed Torvin, slammed him to the ground, and placed a foot on his chest, his own claws at the rogue alpha's throat. The message was clear: I have won. Your cause is finished. The sight of their leader defeated broke the rebellion's spirit. The fighting slowed, then stopped. The rogue wolves dropped their weapons, their will to fight extinguished. Panting, Kalin looked up from Torvin, his golden eyes finding Lyra across the battlefield. In them was not just victory, but a gratitude so profound it shook her to her core. She had not just helped him win a battle, she had given him the means to win the war without a massacre. She had given him a path to unity. The return to the capital was not a march of conquerors, but a procession of unification. Kalin did not drag Torvin in chains. He walked at the head of his army, with the defeated rogue alpha walking beside him, not as a prisoner, but as a prisoner of his own failed ideology. Behind them came the rogue wolves, not as captives, but as wolves returning to the fold, their hatred diffused by the mercy they were shown. The people of Athol lined the streets, their cheers not just for their victorious king, but for the silver-eyed girl who walked beside him, the half-breed who had become their savior. In the grand hall, before the same council that had once scorned her, the scene was profoundly different. Gideon, the traditionalist elder, was the first to kneel. "My king," he said, his voice gruff with newfound respect. "My lady Lyra, I was wrong. Your strength is not a weakness. It is the strength that will carry Veora into a new age." One by one, the council members pledged their loyalty, not just to Kalin, but to the vision he and Lyra represented. Later, on the same balcony where they had once stood in uncertain silence, Kalin and Lyra looked out over their kingdom. The twilight sky was no longer a brooding gray, but was painted with the brilliant gold and rose of a setting sun. "It is over," Lyra said, softly. "No," Kalin replied, turning to her. "It is just beginning." He took her hand, his touch warm and sure. "I told you I didn't believe in fate. I believed in you, and every moment since has proven me right. You are my equal, Lyra. In strategy, in strength, in heart. This kingdom is yours as much as it is mine." He didn't ask her to be his queen. He stated it as a fact, as inevitable as the sunrise. Lyra looked at their joined hands, then out at the kingdom she had helped save. The outskirts, the forests, the gleaming city, it was all her home. She was no longer an outsider. She was the bridge. She was the future. She looked into his golden eyes, seeing the king, the warrior, the man, and the boy she had helped heal. "Yes," she said, a single, simple word that held the weight of a vow, a promise, and a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity. Together, they turned to face their people, ready to build the future they had fought so hard to win. The coronation was unlike any other in the history of Veora. It was not held in the stuffy grand hall, but in the open air, in the palace gardens under the first light of a new dawn. Wolves and humans stood side by side, their faces turned not just to one throne but to two. Kalin sat, the crown of wolves resting Lee on his brow. But beside him, on a throne of intertwined silver and oak, sat Lyra. She was crowned not with gold, but with a delicate circlet of moonstones that glimmered with the same light as her eyes, the Alpha Queen, the healer, the seer, the bridge. As the cheers of their people rose to meet the sun, Lyra reached out and took Kalin's hand. There were no grand pronouncements, no passionate kisses for the crowd. Just a look, a squeeze of the hand, a silent communication that spoke volumes. Their love story was not one of stolen kisses and whispered sweet nothings. It was written in shared battles, in quiet understandings, in healed wounds and united pacts. It was a partnership forged in the belief that the other was more, and that together, they were everything. The kingdom of Veora was whole. The shadows of the past had been banished by the dawning of a new, hopeful day. And as the Alpha King and Queen looked out over their united kingdom, they knew that the greatest adventure was not in the winning of the crown, but in the building of the future that lay, bright and endless, before them. The end. Thank you for joining Lyra and Kalin on their journey. If you enjoyed their story of love, destiny, and finding strength in difference, please like, share, and subscribe for more epic tales from the world of Veora.